Hello YouTube, happy Saturday. Did a few things on the Trans Am there yesterday, and I didn't really take a lot of videos, but I wanted to go over a few things. Now I bolted the transmission up to the motor. When you do the Turbo 350s, Powerglides, Turbo 400s, etc., you can only use 5 bolts. For some reason on that side, the top bolt on the LS block, top passenger side bolt, it's not there. The hole in the block's not there. They've moved it straight at the very top for some reason. But when you do Turbo 350, Powerglide, Turbo 400, whatever, in these cars, you only get to use 5 bolts in the transmission to hold it to the block. You'll see over here, I got the back of I got a 5.3 set in here. I got a couple of 5.3, what are they, 3.622, whatever, cranks. But see, you'll use this one, and this one, and then they put that one up there and got rid of this one, and you use this one and this one, and that one's gone, which sucks because on a Turbo 350, Turbo 400, Powerglide, etc., that's usually where the dipstick bolts do. But we've got this transmission shield in ours, and as you can see, once you get that dipstick in there, the top of the dipstick hits that transmission shield. I don't know if y'all can see that transmission shield, but yeah, it protects your feet if the Flexplate ever decides to exit stage left or whatever. Yeah, because like your feet are right over here. That's about where the Flexplate is. If it comes loose and starts flying everywhere, which does happen sometimes, it protects your feet, which they make aftermarket cases you can put on these transmissions for that as well. And getting that dipstick and that transmission shield in there, even on the small block Chevy, is a freaking nightmare. You'll see I had to bend it a little and I kinked it, but when I bent it, I grabbed it with some vice grips up here to bend it, and look, I put a divot in it, and now this don't want to go all the way in. I'm going to try to find a socket that fits perfectly in the hole to fix that indent. I can just hammer it down in there a little and take that indent out. And it don't want to lock. But it's locking now. But yeah, that transmission shield, we won't have to bolt it. But if that was an issue, you could cut the bracket off and weld that bracket up here and bolt it to the back of the head. That's a bolt hole right there, see? That would be perfect. But I used the stock Turbo 350 dipstick that we had before, and it fit right in there. Just, I don't even know if I needed to bend it, honestly. But you'll see it's right up against the engine. But yeah, it ain't going nowhere because that shield's right on top of it. That shield's, I know you can't see it, that shield's just screwed back so far, and then it hits the top of the dipstick and holds the dipstick down. That dipstick ain't going nowhere. You'll not pull it out of there with that shield bolted down. But on the flex plates, they make you got the disc flex plate, which is for the 4L60E. These LS motors with automatic transmissions, they usually come with a 4L60E. Well, the Gen 3, Gen 4s anyway. Automatic transmission. They come with a 4L60E or a 4L80. And this is the dished 4L60E flex plate. And this is the flat 4L80E flex plate for these LS motors. Now the 4L60, the flex plate is dished. It like bows in. You'll know it when you see it. And then the 4L80 flex plate is flat. It's perfectly flat. Now the Powerglide, the Turbo 350, the 200R4, the 700R4, and even the 4L60E all the way up to 97, the 4L60E up to 97, they all share a torque converter bolt pattern and a flex plate bolt pattern. Now the Turbo 400 and the 4L80E, they share a bolt pattern. And then the 98 up 4L60E has its own bolt pattern. Now, fortunately, we was able to use the stock Flexplate because Christopher's Circle D converter, it actually comes with all 3 bolt holes. And I went to bolt the torque converter up, and 2 of the holes I can get the bolt through, but the 3rd hole, for some reason, is smaller than the other 2, and I can't get the bolt through there, so I'm gonna have to make it a little bit bigger. But I don't know why that 3rd hole is smaller than the other 2. It lines up perfectly because, like I said, his converter has bolt holes for all 3 bolt patterns that Chevy makes. Why that bolt hole's a little bit smaller? I mean, the bolt almost goes through, but it just won't go through. But the other 2, I mean, it goes through easy. There's actually a little space. But when you do that, you also have to have, this is the 4L60E flex plate, the dished one. When you do that, though, you do have to have the adapter. You need the flex plate that matches your torque converter bolt pattern, whatever it may be, and then you have to have an adapter snout, because the snout for the older transmission torque converters, that don't stick out far enough to stick into the back of the crank like it's supposed to line that up. So you have to get a little adapter. And they make adapters for the flat 4L80E flex plate and the 4L60E dished flex plate. And even there's a lot more to it when it gets into some of the flat flex plates. The crank is longer in the back, and you can put a flat flex plate on the short crank back there, but the adapter's thicker, and then it's got the longer snout as well. If you do some Google searches, you'll see all that. But let's dive into this a little bit different. In the back, there's a difference between the short and the long crank. Now, typically on your left hand side here, this is the long crank. This is usually the one that's going to have the 4L80E flex plate in it. The 4L80E flex plate is flat, so that space needs to be longer for that flat plate to come out farther. Now on your right is the 4L60E, the one that comes with the dished 4L60E flex plate. The flex plate is dished, so it bows out and it makes up that space with that bow. So if your torque converter had the Turbo 400 bolt pattern, you could just use the 4L80E flex plate with this adapter and you're good. If yours came with the dished 4L60E flex plate and the short crank. Oh, and also the 4L80E flex plate is a lot stronger unit than the 4L60E flex plate. Now, if yours has the long crank and the flat flex plate, I'm pretty sure that makes it stick out further, so I'm pretty sure there is not an adapter needed for the snout of the torque converter to go up into the motor. But now on the dished 4L60E flex plate, there is a snout that you have to get to make that stick out further, so the snout of the converter can go up in it like it typically would do on the back of the crank. And that's what this picture is right here. But this vehicle, the torque converter from Circle D, has the bolt pattern in the converter for all three sizes. So we use the factory 4L60E dished flex plate, and we use this adapter, and it bolts up to converter. Like I said, the converter has the bolt holes for all 3 patterns, and we'll go over the patterns here in a little bit further in the video. Now, the most important thing when doing this is to measure from the middle of the bolt hole to the center of the torque converter, and on the flex plate from the center of the bolt hole to the middle hole, or the middle of the hole, and you multiply that number by 2, and that gives you your your bolt pattern measurement. Now, most torque converters these days, they come with the bolt pattern for the Turbo 350, the Powerglide, the 4L60E up to 1997, the 200R4, the 700R4, etc., and the Turbo 400 and the 4L80E. Remember, the 4L60E from 98 up is its own bolt pattern. Oddly enough, Christopher's came with all three on a Circle D converter. Alright guys, here's your patterns too. Like I said, take those measurements I told you before. From the center of the bolt hole to the center of the flex plate, multiply that by 2. From the center of the bolt hole to the middle of the torque converter, multiply that by 2. Your flex plate and your torque converter bolt patterns have to line up or you're not going to get a bolt in there. Now, the Turbo 400 and the 4L80E share a bolt pattern of 11.5 inches. The Turbo 350, the Powerglide, 700R4, 200R4, and the 4L60E up to 1997 are a 10.75 bolt pattern. Most converters will come with the 11.5 and the 10.75 bolt pattern that you see today. Now again, the 98 up is its own bolt pattern. The 4L60E has its own bolt pattern, 1998 and up. It's 11.062. So if you have that dished 4L60E flex plate and you have a Turbo 350 or a Turbo 400 bolt pattern, you're going to have to get a different flex plate. They sell dished flex plates that have the Turbo 350 or the Turbo 400 bolt pattern. And also when you use that dish flex plate, you have to use this spacer as well. Alright, so let's recap. You got the longer crank on the left, and you got the 4L80E flat flex plate, and you're doing a Turbo 400, Turbo 350 Powerglide swap, and your converter's got the bolt pattern for the Turbo 400 and the Turbo 350 and the Powerglide. You're good to go. Now, if you've got the crank length on the right, then you want to run the 4L80E flex plate, then you have to buy this adapter and along with the 4L80E flat flex plate. Now, if you got this crank snout on the right, this length crank on the right, and you got the dished flex plate, which is usually for the 4L60E, and it's only going to have the bolt pattern for the 4L60E 98 up, which is different than the rest, and your torque converter only has the bolt pattern for the Turbo 400, Turbo 350, Powerglide, etc., then you're going to have to buy this kit, this flex plate, and that has the correct bolt pattern. Plus, if you use that dished flex plate, you got to have this adapter as well. But yeah.
If you have any questions, hit the comments. But
where the transmission shield
hits the firewall, we had to. We wanted to scoot the motor back as far as we could. That's why we got these dirty dingo slider mounts, and I made a video on those if y'all want to check it out. But I had to drop the back of the transmission, and with these slider bolts loose, I slid the motor back as far as it would go. And then I tightened all this up, and then I jacked the transmission up. Once you jack it up, you can't slide it back because with the transmission all the way up, it won't slide back because this will hit the firewall, that shield, that transmission shield. So I had to drop the back of the transmission, then slide it back, then you lift the transmission up and it'll push up on that tunnel will flex some. But I had to go through all that to get the motor scooted back as far as we could go, which might be an issue because I'm not sure them truck headers which are clear, that K-member, I'm not sure. I'm about to go get one of those and we'll see about that. But yeah, I got the motor mount bolts in, everything's tightened up. I got the transmission, the motor's slid all the way back as far as it'll go. I got that bolted up. I got the transmission bolts in. Hold the transmission up against the block. All I gotta do now is enlarge one hole on the flex plate and put the torque converter bolts in, and we're going to space that out. Now, when you put your torque converter in, and sometimes there will be a space between the torque converter and the flex plate. You want to measure that space because you don't want to push the torque converter up against the flex plate more than 1/4 of an inch. But anyway, if it has to go more than that, you want to put some washers in between the flex plate and the torque converter, because if you push that torque converter out too far, it'll disengage the pump and burn your pump up or something like that. But yeah, you want to make sure that spacing's, his is a little over 1/4 of an inch, so we use, and it was like that on the small block Chevy too, bringing the converter up against the flex plate. So I usually use one washer. It's about 1/16 of an inch thick for that, and I've remeasured it, and that puts us right at, I think, 1/4 of an inch coming forward. But yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get in there and make that one hole a little bit bigger. I could probably just do it with a Dremel and a sanding wheel, but I've ruined all my bits for my Dremel, so I have to go buy some of those. We'll get that enlarged, and we'll get the torque converter bolted down. And then I got the starter and the alternator, and Christopher ordered an alternator bracket. We're going to put the alternator up here. But once we get all that, we'll get that on. But once I get them torque converter bolts in, I'm going to put the filter on, because the car's all the way already up in the air. I'm going to put the filter on. I'm going to put some oil in it, and I'm going to go ahead and run at least enough of the wire harness before I put the starter in to hook to the crank position sensor, which sits behind the starter. I don't know if y'all can see that. It got painted black. But yeah, that's on the list of things to do. But y'all have a good Saturday. I'm not sure how much I might work on it later tonight, but today's my mom's birthday, so I'm gonna go get her something for her birthday and take her out to eat. And y'all, thanks for watching. Have a great day.